Have you ever heard someone say that America is a democracy? It's a common phrase, repeated so often that it seems like an undeniable truth. But here's the thing. The United States was never designed to be a democracy. It was designed to be a constitutional republic. And the difference between these two forms of government isn't just a matter of semantics. It's fundamental to understanding how our system works and why the founders built it the way they did. When we call a republic a democracy, we're not just being imprecise with our language. We're actually inverting the entire design that the founders carefully constructed. Let's start by clarifying what these terms actually mean. A democracy, in its purest form, is ruled by the majority. The people vote directly on laws and policies, and whatever the majority wants becomes the law of the land. It sounds appealing, doesn't it? The will of the people, pure and unfiltered. But here's the problem. In a pure democracy, there are no limits on what the majority can do. If 51% of the people decide that the other 49% shouldn't have certain rights, that's perfectly legitimate in a democracy. The majority rules. Period. A constitutional republic, on the other hand, operates very differently. Yes, the people elect representatives, but those representatives don't have unlimited power. They're bound by a constitution, a set of fundamental laws that can't be changed by a simple majority vote. In a republic, individual rights are protected even when they're unpopular. The majority doesn't get to trample on the rights of the minority, because the Constitution sets boundaries that even the majority must respect. Think of it this way. Democracy is the subset, and the republic is the sovereign framework. Democracy is a tool used within the republic, but it's not the defining characteristic. The founders understood this distinction deeply. They had studied history, and they knew what happened to pure democracies. They inevitably descended into mob rule, instability, and eventually tyranny. James Madison warned about the dangers of pure democracy in Federalist No. 10, describing how factions could use majority power to oppress minorities. The founders didn't want a system where the passions of the moment could override fundamental rights. So they created a republic with democratic elements, not a democracy with republican features. The Constitution they wrote is filled with mechanisms designed to limit majority power: the separation of powers, checks and balances, the Bill of Rights, the Electoral College, the Senate's equal representation, regardless of population. So why does it matter if we call America a democracy instead of a republic? Because language shapes how we think, and how we think shapes how we act. When we call our system a democracy, we subtly shift the focus from constitutional limits to majority will. We start to believe that whatever the majority wants should become law, regardless of constitutional constraints. We begin to see the Constitution not as a set of binding limits, but as an outdated document that gets in the way of the people's will. This is exactly the inversion the founders feared. Consider the consequences of this shift in thinking. When people believe we live in a democracy, they become frustrated with constitutional limits. Why should the Electoral College override the popular vote? Why should unelected judges be able to strike down laws passed by elected representatives? Why should a minority in the Senate be able to block legislation that the majority supports? These questions only make sense if you think the system is supposed to be a democracy. But if you understand that we live in a constitutional republic, these features aren't bugs. They're essential safeguards designed to protect individual liberty and prevent the tyranny of the majority. The conflation of democracy and republic also affects how we approach reform and change. In a democracy, the solution to every problem is more majority rule. But in a republic, the solution is to return to constitutional principles and ensure that government stays within its proper bounds. When we lose sight of the distinction, we lose sight of the very framework that makes our liberty possible. Precise language matters because it reflects precise thinking. The founders chose their words carefully when they designed our system. They didn't call it a democracy, they called it a republic, and they did so for very specific reasons, rooted in their understanding of history, human nature, and the requirements of liberty. When we abandon their language, we risk abandoning their principles. Here's the bottom line. Calling America a democracy isn't just inaccurate, it's a fundamental misunderstanding of how our system was designed to work. The United States is a constitutional republic that uses democratic processes within a framework of constitutional limits. Democracy is the tool, not the master. The Constitution is sovereign, not the majority. Understanding this distinction is essential if we want to preserve the liberty and rights that the founders worked so hard to secure. So the next time you hear someone call America a democracy, remember, words matter, distinctions matter, and the difference between a democracy and a republic matters more than ever.